Hello and welcome to a special joint production from CGTN and Euronews asking who will lead the next wave of green growth. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.
And I'm Jeremy Wilkes at Euronews in Brussels. It's great to be with you. In this programme, we're debating how the race to deploy clean technology will unfold.
Both China and Europe agree that we're aiming for a sustainable future. We need to complete the energy transition. And we have to build resilience in the face of climate change.
To meet those goals, we need the right mix of technologies, legislation and cooperation. And in today's world, we can also expect plenty of competition on the road to a greener planet too.
Now, to debate the question of who will lead the next wave of green growth, I'd like to welcome our four panelists. We have Professor Wu Changhua, President of Global Climate Academy and Chair of the Governing Council of Asia Pacific Water Forum.
And I'd also like to welcome Karine Vernier, the CEO of Inno Energy in France.
Hello.
And another guest from China, Dr. Ma Jun, is Director of the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs.
And I'd like to welcome Ben Honan, Investment Lead for the Climate Kick, an EU community working on climate innovation. And I'd like to start with an icebreaker question to you, Ben. Is there one green technology that you're particularly excited about today?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. We're quite interested in energy storage at the moment. I mean, all renewable technologies are interesting and the market's evolving quickly, so we're quite excited for the next couple of years.
Professor Wu, the same question. What green technology excites you the most?
Well, at this very moment, I'm looking into the AI-enabled industrial decarbonization, which is a fascinating developing at this moment, particularly for China context. On one side, we do need to decarbonize the industrial emissions as much as possible. But in the meantime, now we have really fast growing AI capability. So combining the two together is very exciting to see what's going to be unfolding.
Karine, can I come to you with that question? What are you excited about at the moment?
It's extremely difficult to give you just one technology. I followed my two colleagues. We are looking a lot on storage. We are looking a lot on hydrogen, artificial intelligence also. So it's a mix of multiple new technologies that are coming to change the world at the end of the day.
Dr. Ma Jun, the same question. What green technology do you consider the most important for the moment?
Yeah, we continue to track the amazing progress made on renewables, renewable technology. And I was invited to visit a solar company that developed the so-called perovskite solar panels, which can absorb a large amount of sunlight using an extremely thin layer. It means that it can be stacked upon top of the silicon cells for much higher efficiency. It also means that it can be painted on top of cars, surface of buildings, or even on sportswears. So the cost will be a lot more affordable.
Cost is very important. Now, let's move on from ambition to action, which was supposed to be the goal of the recent climate change summit in Belém, Brazil. Now, Ben, if I can go to you first. Now, COP30 in Brazil just came to a close, and although the final deal was not seen as a success by many commentators, we did see a lot of coalitions of nations deciding to work together on environmental problems and clean technologies. What do you read into that trend?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually. It's quite promising to see a total of 80 countries come together and form a kind of sub-COP coalition, if you like, to talk about the phase out of fossil fuels. We think that that's a really interesting development and something that really wasn't part of the conversation 2 years ago, and it's now front and center, which is really interesting and something that we often talk about. Sometimes the higher level agreements at a national level or at COP itself aren't clear. But if you look below that to what the cities are doing, to what the industry is planning, then often you can find really interesting points of progress and some fascinating markets to step into. So we think it's quite interesting. It would have been nice if it was in the COP agreement itself, but nonetheless, we think sets up very nicely for the conversation next year.
Yeah, Corinne, a lot of people said it was a relatively weak COP in terms of the agreement. We also have the US recommitting to fossil fuels under Trump. We have Canada also rolling back on climate commitments to allow more oil and gas production. Who do you think is going to lead the next wave of green growth?
I confirm that we have some move back to the fossil energies, but I would say that that's not because we have this move back that's the end of the story for the new energy and the green energy. For me, it will not be led by a single actor. It's about, I would say, 4 parameters. The first one is the innovation hub. This is from where we will bring some new solutions on the market, which will be cheaper, easier to implement, using less raw materials, being recyclable. So this innovation part is super important. The second part is the scale up. The scale up because this is only with giga scale that we are creating the dynamic and that the market appeal for new technology, because the market does not want to take any risk. So you must be at the scale up size. Then there is a global national industrial alliances, if I can say that, that will ensure that the whole value chain related to each sector is under control. And finally, and perhaps it's the more important, the demand, because if there is no demand, you can generate or produce what you want. There will be no market, and so it will be a dead end. And if you look at that, innovation, giga scale alliances, and demand, then at the end of the day, you cannot see only one single geography. Nobody can manage in total autarky, and so the world must cooperate. And even if it has been a weak COP, I would say it has been a COP, and this is the place where we have to all cooperate.
Thanks for that, Corinne. Now I'll ask the same question to our guest here in Shanghai, China. Professor Wu, what do you think? Who do you think will lead the next wave of green growth?
Well, I echo very strongly what Corinne just said. I don't think you can single out any single country, say that this country will be tasked to lead the next round of green innovation or green transformation. But even though the COP30 is generally regarded as weak, but there are a lot of progress, as a breakthroughs already. On top of that, I think there is a global recognition that leadership companies in clean energy or green energy, green transition somehow happens when they somehow better align national strategy, policy, innovation, scale, as well as actually system thinking. I think China definitely has made a very strong and convincing case to the international community that how it's been leading the global clean energy transition. If you look at the scale, China is definitely the country at this moment on this planet, leading in installment, in industrial value chain, in investment, you name it. In the meantime, if you look at the technology capability, China has been moving up along the innovation curve as well, rather than just catching up. But in the meantime, investing heavily in new technologies, like better storage capabilities. If you look at ultra high voltage grid capabilities there as well. And then if you look at the system thinking, I think China has made a very, very convincing case how it integrates and connects everything. While Europe and US definitely each have their own capability, strengths in terms of innovation, but China somehow manages in terms of really able to put everything together. So literally China has been connecting infrastructure, industrial value chain, products, technology, financing, you name it, actually into one big call it a green growth engine. And that's where China succeeded so far at this moment. Looking into the next stage, I think I wouldn't say China will be the only country to lead next green transition. Rather, I do see China, Europe, US, as well as many other developing countries really coming together. China has its own strength in terms of scaling, in terms of the pace, in terms of affordability, driving down the cost, industrial capability there. But in the meantime, EU definitely has a very strong capability in terms of investing, innovation, regulation standards, as well as actually a market there as well. And together we'll be able to really put in all the resources, expertise, capability together to lead the next round of green transition.
That's interesting. I want to put a question to Marjun about this. I think it's easy to kind of forget the big picture. The reason we're doing this is to reduce carbon emissions. China has pledged to cut carbon emissions by 7 to 10% from peak levels by 2035, which is its first absolute reduction target. Do you think that's enough?
Yeah, thank you. First and foremost, yes, this is not just the first time for China to commit to a absolute emission reduction, but it is also the first time for it to make it cover the whole economy and also all different kind of greenhouse gases. So it was a progress made forward, and for a country with 1.4 billion people. This is not easy because it's still going through that massive industrialization and urbanization, and this energy and economic transition, social economic transition is not easy. If this target can be achieved, it will bring the single biggest reduction over the next 10 years globally. I think this absolutely, is important to the global climate governance, which is in a big trouble, due to all kind of impact.
Could you explain to me a little bit about how those targets are set? What's the thinking inside China and about the numbers? How do you arrive at those percentages?
To set this target, Chinese government have assembled a whole group of experts from all different kind of ministries and industries to try to do their research, of course, based on all the baseline and accounting and modeling, and try to come up with a figure, that. With a target that, as Changhua mentioned, which can align the climate action with the social economic development target, and partially, this is to meet with China's global responsibility, but partially this is also about how to continue to, through the green transformation, create benefits to the Chinese people. Without that, it can be even more difficult for the society to accept this policy, a climate policy. And furthermore, we also, of course, we all need to recognize that the NDCs submitted by all the more than 110 countries put together are not enough to limit temperature below 1.5 degrees. That means that we all need to do more if we don't want to fail the Paris Agreement target. So China's NDC actually left space, made space for that, because it said 10%. It said that we will try to do better, and so 10% should not be considered as the ceiling for China's emission reduction. I think partially it's about culture. Culturally, China tends to set targets that can be over-delivered, while the Western countries tend to set more ambitious targets so as to stimulate more efforts to achieve as much as possible. So there's some difference there, but trust me that I think in China, all the stakeholders will make their efforts to try to bend the curve faster.
Guan, let's move over to talking about innovation, cooperation, and digitalization.
That is very important. I'm so glad you brought this up. I mean, digitalization is the go-to topic here when you talk about the green technology here in China and elsewhere. For that matter, let me turn to our guest in Europe, Corinne. If I can ask you about this, the digital economy is a key engine for a sustainable future. In areas such as artificial intelligence for smart grids, digitalization of industries, and green fintech, will we see more cooperation or more fragmentation between China and Europe? What do you think?
So first, I think that clearly, indeed, the digital economy is a key engine for sustainable future, is and will be more and more a key engine. I think that it's a factor for more cooperation, not more fragmentation, more cooperation, because at the end of the day, it's everybody is winning with the digitalization and artificial intelligence because we are able to create, I would say, leaner, more efficient, and lower energy production systems. So at the end, we are all winning with this kind of new tools. Just give you two examples. If we imagine that we are able to share in between China and Europe digital twins, for example, in industry, then it means that we will all be able to partner to co-develop new platforms and factories, and we will accelerate via the duplication the launching of new large projects in terms of industry, and then we will decarbonize the industry and the world. So it's one good topic for cooperation to share digital twins.
But Corinne, let me ask you real quick, if I can jump in here. Do you see geopolitics, geopolitical headwinds as potential hindrances blocking the digital sharing, digital economy from realizing its fullest potentials when it comes to cooperation between China and Europe?
I don't think so, because I think that this is a solution more than a blocking point. Why? Because if everybody is putting some border mechanisms to block the import from other countries, we will all lose the time for the planet and also the capacity to have global market exchange all over the world. And this is from the very first beginning of the world, the basis of our relationship in between the people and the countries. So sharing digital twins is not about sharing some extremely strategic in terms of defense topics. It's just about sharing the know-how and being able to build value in all the geographies. So for me, it's a factor of acceleration and cooperation, not a blocking point.
A question for Professor Wu, and following on from what Corinne had to say, we know there is a kind of tension in innovation between developing homegrown intellectual property and then collaborating across borders to grow new technology. What would you say are the biggest barriers to collaboration between countries on green tech? Is it, as we were just saying, a lot of it kind of to do with what's in the minds of people rather than the reality on the ground? What's your take?
That's a very important question at this moment of time. IPR, or intellectual property right, is not a new issue. It has always been there, right? Somebody created some kind of technologies, their proprietary rights, and that needs to be protected. But somehow today we are talking about this issue because we're talking about, fighting climate change, sustainability. So green technology somehow sits in the intersection of all the sort of saga landscape, actually, all the complexity, complex issues, dimensions there. I do like Corinne's example. I think the digital twins definitely should be one of the examples, actually, in terms of how countries cross-border collaboration, because there are technology capabilities in terms of to somehow de-risk, the specific data, protect the privacy, and protect, whatever the rights that needs to be protected. But in the meantime, the digital twins, the tools, instruments definitely can be shared. That could be used actually to play a much bigger role, for better benefits there. Now, back to your question. Unfortunately, we do face a lot of barriers when green technologies actually are concerned today. One is a trust issue. We do not trust each other that much these days. That has become a major barrier because, unfortunately, the industrial policies and the national security somehow they've been combined together. We do not trust each other. We cannot really share that much actually from technology perspective. If you look at timing, different countries' geographies actually have different ways of handling intellectual property. China definitely has been sort of demonstrating its capability in terms of really industrializing technologies as quickly as possible to achieve scale, to reduce the cost. But then if you look at the EU and the US is pretty much venture capital sort of driven innovation, cutting edge technologies there. EU has very strong regulatory context there, right? And so the pace is pretty much different. Now, in order to cooperate, actually, so we're in many cases we're not really in a sync or in the same step actually with each other. That's challenging. Now, in terms of standards, I think that there's this sort of fragmentation actually we face all over the place these days. And even on the carbon counting standards there, yes, we have started to have international standards like ISSB. EU has its own carbon disclosure standard. China is moving up there as well. But somehow today, we are still facing challenges in terms of how do we account actually carbon emission, right? Carbon emissions, carbon footprints there. That needs to be addressed. And then very lastly, I do think actually the geopolitical factor is a big one. And somehow, if we do not address the trust issue, and if we continue to let the geopolitical saga interrupting everything actually today, we know for sure, even though we have technologies these days to address climate change, to advance or accelerate the green transition or clean energy transition, somehow we wouldn't be able to achieve that because we wouldn't be able to get to the scale, get to the pace that's needed to do so. So that's pretty much the harsh reality we're living in.
Yeah, we do need to harmonize standards and protocols and coordinate policies in order to lower those barriers of cooperation between China and Europe. Now, Mr. Ma Jun, let me ask you, can you give us some examples of digitalization actually making a difference for the better, of course, and to helping to drive down emissions, or at least to stabilize emissions?
Absolutely, yeah. Over the past 12 years, we have witnessed how digitalization helped to cut China's air and water emission and enhance the quality of the environment. China initiated the Clean Air Action Plan and then Clean Water Action Plan. It's all started from massive monitoring and disclosure. So with all this monitoring, tens of thousands of monitoring stations on which reported sulfur and PM 2.5 and ozone every hour, and then with all this tens of thousands of automatic monitoring installed on the smokestacks of the factories, which help them to report it to the public about their air emission every hour as well. This allows a digital solution to be developed to track the performance of regions, industries, and factories, and also create a real accountability based on the multi-stakeholder governance, through public oversight and government enforcement, and also market-based solutions like green supply chain and green finance. The efficiency is much, much higher. And through this process, China's carbon emission, you asked about the example of emission reduction. China's sulfur dioxide emission at the beginning was, 12 years ago, that was 20 million tons. And in just 10 years of time, it came down to 2.4 million. And nitrogen also cut by half, and PM as well. So as a result, the Beijing, which used to be dubbed as the capital of smog, see its PM 2.5 level dropped from 89.5 micrograms in 2013 to 30.5 last year. And so on the sulfur side, on the air emission side, we have seen a massive reduction already enabled through the digitalization. And now, in China, the carbon accounting, as Changhua mentioned, carbon accounting, on scope 1, 2, 3 are being developed and required. And also, we have also rolled out our own digital solutions which can help even small and medium-sized companies to do their carbon accounting in a more cost-effective way. So those who use the digital solutions to measure and set targets have already achieved a reduction of millions of tons of carbon emission.
That's very interesting. Let me come to Ben, because climate scientists tell us we need to have a 5% drop in emissions every year if we want to stabilize global warming. China is still a huge emitter, but its emissions seem to be flat, or they're falling now. What's behind that? What do you read into that from your point of view, Ben?
Yeah, I think first of all, a massive congratulations to China. That's been a heavy lift, and the first step is always the hardest. So I read a quite promising signal into that, and I think it's a very interesting market signal towards Europe that China is well planned and well committed to its decarbonisation journey. And in there is a lot of market opportunity. There's what we always say, where there's emissions, there's opportunities, and I think that that's a big signal for big business in Europe and for European politicians that the game is afoot. Decarbonisation is the future, and it's time to get moving faster. And in some ways, it's a race, but it's a positive race because it's one where everybody wins. We get clean air, cheap electricity, better quality food. It sounds like quite a nice kind of future scenario to me. So I'm quite pleased with that achievement. I think it's excellent, and really looking forward to how that can increase and ratchet over time so that we can blow past the 5% reduction and start to talk about 15, 20% year-over-year reductions. That's when things get really interesting.
Ben, for people in other parts of the world outside Europe or China, what do you think are the lessons and the kind of models perhaps they should be following then?
Yeah, I think, Professor, we mentioned before, systems thinking is really important. So this idea that you can't just have one particular silver bullet option or one particular technology is not going to win the day. What you really need is a whole market development engine that quite deliberately looks at the regulation that's in place, that influences consumer demand, that works with the big industrial incumbents on decarbonisation, and really build an ecosystem of players. So the message to the world, I think, would be like, maybe let's let up on this unicorn narrative a little bit and instead focus on the market development side of things. How can we change the way that the market operates? How do we focus on these reporting standards? These kind of mundane things that they sort of sit below most people's headline attention, but they're really important to building a strong and innovative ecosystem. So that's the message. If you want to follow in the footsteps of Europe and in China, then start to think about how you can change your system.
Thanks so much for sharing, Beng. I'm sure China has a lot to learn from our European partners and friends as well. Now, Jeremy, let's move on now to discuss the most promising technologies. Perhaps they're already here with us, like solar, or perhaps they're just around the corner or just coming on stream, like hydrogen, nuclear, or large-scale renewable energy storage.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. We come back to you about what you're talking about, unicorns, the fact that we have this kind of tendency to focus on one particular technology. But we've already kind of at the beginning highlighted a few. Are there some that you really think have a great deal of potential right now that we should spend a lot of time concentrating on and investing in now because they are ready to go and will really make a difference?
I think there are quite a number of things that are well discussed around the value of renewable energy and the rollout and scaling challenge. I would kind of more interestingly these days talk about the role of artificial intelligence in decarbonizing some really tricky industrial processes. I think that that's where we can potentially find some really interesting breakthrough options in the next year or two. We have a really interesting change in the way that we can solve problems and the way that we can set about experimenting as well in digital twin models. So I'm quite interested and would like more people to be looking at AI, not so much in the chatbot sense, but very much in the sense of how can we use AI for experimentation in industrial processes like nitrogen fixing or energy production. How do we use it for biomedical processes? And how can we use it to optimize our food and fiber systems? There's a lot of really complicated real world challenges that are wrapped up in decarbonisation. I think we tend to think about electricity production, but we also have to tackle transportation. We have to tackle food production. There are a lot of different very technical processes that I think applied AI is really very interesting for finding some breakthrough solutions. So that's what I would like the conversation to shift towards, a little bit less about solar panels and unicorns and a little bit more how do we get into these deep tech industrial processes.
Now, Professor Wu, I'm curious to know if you think there are emerging European technologies that you believe China should embrace and adopt more often and more widely.
Definitely, there are plenty. I think even though China has been demonstrating its leadership in terms of, accelerated the clean energy transition, particular from this, manufacturing capability, industrial value chain, and installation stuff like that. But from really technology perspective, we still have a lot to learn from Europe. I've been looking into some key areas, dimensions there. The firstly, actually, is really about industrial efficiency, deeper industrial efficiency. Of course, now we have AI. AI definitely is adding to that picture as well. But if you look at, for instance, high pressure, high temperature, a heat pump for steel, chemical processes, Europe definitely has been leading that. If you look at the energy perspective, integrated, smart grid integration and flexibility systems, and because China, in many, many ways, is still strong in terms of a large scale, centralized sort of energy system. But in Europe, actually, they are very good at a distributed model. In order to do so, actually, so this integration flexible system is very, very key. So there's a lot China should learn. The third dimension is really about circularity and the material science there. Yes, even though China has been really moving ahead with, battery recycling, everything like that. But if you look at the technologies, how to recycle technologies for higher value, I think Europe definitely is much, much stronger actually than China in many, many ways. And then if you look at hydrogen, Europe definitely has been leading breakthroughs in terms of green hydrogen. I think China, of course, is trying to catch up in that area as well, but definitely Europe has been leading. So those are probably around the climate mitigation, energy transition perspective. Now coming on board actually is also the other side about adaptation, resilience there. So then, for instance, nature-based solutions or nature-positive solutions. If you look at the peatland, restorations there, urban resilience. So China definitely needs to learn a lot from Europe. Now, particularly China has submitted its first adaptation action plan to its NDCs to COP30. And so now we have a plan we need to deploy to make sure we have technology solutions there. In that area, I do think China, EU share a lot. So China can learn more from Europe from that perspective.
Thank you for that. That's very interesting. I mean, what's going through my mind, though, as I listen to you, is that we're going to need a lot of power. We're going to need a lot of energy. Corinne, can I come to you? Where's the energy going to come from?
I would say let's do the link with the geopolitical topics. If you look at the geopolitical topics, at the end of the day, it's about raw materials. And so my view is that we have to create some new way of producing energy that not consume too much raw materials, so recycling, for example, or that consume raw materials that are well spread all over the world. and that will avoid a lot of problems. So there is no one magic solution for everybody everywhere. Once again, I think that it's about a mix with a strong focus on the end of the chain, which is to how we recycle the products. But today, my view is that if we bet on way of producing that are not using to concentrated raw materials, we will have the key for the future.
Thanks so much for sharing Korean. Now, Mr. Ma, let me ask you about fossil fuels because it has been around with us and they probably will be in the foreseeable future. We just saw with COP30 in Brazil how difficult it is just to reach consensus on moving away from fossil fuels entirely. So how would you characterize China's path, which is unique, to decarbonization today?
Thank you. Yeah, at COP30, in Berlin, I also, personally witnessed how difficult it is to reach, to even reiterate the Dubai consensus, the Dubai agreement on transitioning away from fossil fuel. I mean, even that could not be put into the final document for COP30 because this issue now it's so challenging and to me, I think, the failure, partially at least, can be anticipated, can be expected, because from COP29 to COP30, there's not enough discussion about the commitment made in Dubai in COP28 on tripling the renewable capacity. The world come together to agree with that, but unfortunately, there was not enough discussion about how to actually implement that. But among all the countries, China stood out. With this massive investment and deployment on the renewable energy. I mean, that is absolutely mind-boggling. China achieved the 2030 target on renewables last year, 6 years earlier. And on the solar power alone, we just roll out and launch our new report, which titled 1,000 gigawatts of solar power. But even before we can publish our report, the capacity already reached 1,100 giga. And the installation capacity grew by some 56 times in 11 years. And power generation capacity, 100 times. And China's capacity equals the rest of the top 9 countries put together. And along with this renewable energy transition, it's China's also spared no efforts on electrification. China's electrifying its economy 9 times faster than the rest of the world. So this combination of energy transition plus electrification, set a clear path, not just toward carbon picking, but carbon neutrality. So I think yes.
Can I ask you about, I mean, we've talked a lot about how China's achieved things, but how do you see the way that we're governing shared challenges, the way that we're managing things here in Europe? What's the kind of perspective from China on the European governance of how we're trying to roll out these green technologies in the way that you're talking about? What's the view from Beijing?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all the rest of the distinguished guests, which could, repeatedly repeated this term of collaboration and working together. So I think, both EU and China are the clear, global they have the ambition to be global leaders to deal with climate change, and both have the capacity and resources and innovative power to try to be the leader, be leaders. And if the two, and as the guest all mentioned, each have its own advantage. EU also have a lot of advantages, and as Changhua mentioned, on the circular economy side, on the recycling side, we have so much to learn from EU. But on the renewable side, now over the past 10 years, China gradually developed some more innovative solutions. So if the two can really come to work together, I think that will be a blessing, not just to our two regions and countries, our two sides, but also it will be a bless to the entire world, particularly to those least developed countries, which we all need to think about. Even in Africa, we have hundreds of millions still denied for the basic access to power electricity.
Ben, we see the EU winding back Green Deal commitments with its simplification packages, and we have the carbon border adjustment mechanism on the horizon in the year 2026. Do you think the EU's path towards the green tag, its path forward, is fully understood, is actually clear to those outside Brussels?
Yeah, I think it speaks to just how complex the challenge of taking climate action seriously really is, right? I think the bigger picture in Europe is that consumers are very forward on climate action, that politicians by and large are very forward on climate action, SMEs and industrial players are as well. But when you really face the facts of what it means to transition at the speed that we're talking about, you end up in some really uncomfortable situations that are very costly and honestly quite painful. So I think what's happening in Europe is a bit of a course correction, a bit of a bump in the road. I think the bigger transition is still very much underway. I've not heard anybody backing off from the message in Brussels around sustainability and competitiveness being the future for Europe. I think there's some discussion around how we do that well and how we do that efficiently and how we do that in good partnership with industry in particular. So I think it's definitely a setback. The omnibus vote was a real disappointment. But I think if you take a step back from the cut and thrust day-to-day actions in Brussels and look at the bigger trends, then for sure there's not that much shifting in Europe, that we're still very much interested in a future economy that's sustainable, that's just and has a nice place to live for all of the citizens of Europe and indeed around the world.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I mean, here in Euronews, of course, we're monitoring what we hear from the European Commission all of the time. A question for Karine. The European Commission wants to boost production and recycling of rare earths in Europe to reduce the dependency on China. Do you think that's a wise move?
I don't like the end of the question, in fact, because it's not to reduce dependency on China. It's to be able to produce in our own geography. And that's the point. The partnership with China is clearly on the table. And we love working with Chinese when it's question to implement production units in Europe. So there is no way from European people to, no will from European people to stop the cooperation with the Chinese. And as it has been said just previously, China has a lot of things to create value in Europe. And on the contrary, we have a lot to bring as Europeans to China. So it's all about a partnership. And the question is around the balance. My view is that, once again, the cooperation will be key. For example, if you look at PV, today China has the know-how in how to produce cells and modules, but we cannot, as Europeans, consider that we can only buy all the products to China. So we have to produce in our territory, not meaning that we want to produce without Chinese. So that's the key point. So let's not misunderstand or create some fight where it's not question to have some.
Thanks for these clarifications, Corinne. Now, Professor Wu, do you think China and Europe can find immediate common ground on things like rare earth and critical raw materials and show that effective global governance is actually possible?
The short answer is absolutely yes. I think partly, as Corinne mentioned, this is one of the areas EU, China already been working together, but somehow we do have some hurdles, challenges that we need to figure out how to remove or lower the hurdles in order to achieve the scaling or accelerate it to actually transition there. Now, back to the bilateral on the rare earth issues. I think there are a few ways of looking at this particular issue. The first point I want to emphasize, actually both sides share the vulnerability. If you look at the narrative, actually, China is using this sort of a secured supply chain sort of a narrative. EU side actually is using the phrase like, strategic autonomy. If you look at the underlying narrative there, it's pretty much the same thing. We all expect to have, the predictability, and we do need to have, the security. We have to make sure they are produced responsibly there as well. So from that perspective, actually, I think we do need to understand, we share the vulnerability. The second point I want to emphasize is that I think it's all understood really, really well. Cooperation is much cheaper, actually, than confrontation. Particularly from the rare earth perspective. And if we work together, if we actually go alone, let me put it that way, if we go alone, actually, we all know the costs rise, the barriers started to rise, and basically the transition will be slow, much, much slower, and also geopolitical part actually will be much deeper. And that's not the scenario we want to, all get into. Rather, if we really work together, we'll be able to really investing in each other, investing in responsible, green, sustainable mining, refinery, as well as manufacturing there as well. The third point I do want to emphasize, I think rare earth probably offers one of the best opportunity or test bed to see how the two largest economies in the world can really work together, joining up forces to continue to lead global clean energy transition to fight climate change. And on the positive side, I think we started to see, for instance, we're all addressing, investing heavily in transparency, disclosure, and invest, for instance, biodiversity, nature, and also actually just transition there as well. So there are positive signals already, or focuses already. The two parts already, the two sides already taking steps. And that's where I think this global governance comes in. And so we already have the foundation. Somehow we need to further opening up to each other and trying to figure out actually how to invest in global governance to make sure, we walk together, go together, benefit from, in that process respectively. But in the meantime, really accelerating global clean energy transition.
Thanks very much for that. And we're going to wrap things up soon, but I just wanted to come with a final question to everybody. Maybe I can come to Corinne first. We talked a lot about who will lead and where. What's one change that you'd make now to accelerate the deployment of green technologies?
To accelerate the deployment, it's to create the fair conditions of market, of competition in each territory. Meaning that if we want to go, if we consider Europe, for sure, there is place for Chinese products in Europe. That's not a question. For sure, there is place for European products or energy made in Europe. And if we cooperate, there is room for everybody. And that's the point. In all the discussion we had on the artificial intelligence, raw materials, recycling, everything is linked, or climate adaptation, everything is linked to a proper cooperation and a well-balanced cooperation. So my point is, let's not focus on what is not going well. Let's focus on what is going well. We are totally able to cooperate. We are industrial. We are not doing politics. And so that's probably the key to succeed on the ground. Let's work all together and we will change the world.
Together we will change the world. On that note, let me ask you, Marjorie, what is one change you would like to see happening to accelerate the green transition?
I think, very much agree with the Korean, and we need collaboration, and we need to have a healthy competition. Competition is not a problem. Market competition actually motivate change and enhance the whole efficiency and create values. And I think we need to focus on those solutions that give values, not, that's the other side of the coin. We should not just try to, only set all this target with all this, troubling global climate governance. Only setting those ambitious targets is not enough. We need to tap into the technologies, AI and renewable, and all this, and try to create real good solutions.
Professor Wu, can we come to you with the same question about a change you'd make now to accelerate the deployment of green technologies?
I like both Korean and Marjorie's point, but in the meantime, I would like to go further to the root cause. The one thing I would like to see change is literally to fix the trust infrastructure. Fundamentally, if we do not manage to address that, all the aspirations we have on the table, or the targets, the commitments, wouldn't be able to be delivered very successfully. So I will go for fix the trust infrastructure.
Now, Ben, you had the final word.
Yeah, I agree. It's very important that we work on the governance and trust relationship all around the world. And I think that that's very interesting change that's possible in the very near future as data infrastructure comes online and the advent of artificial intelligence makes collaboration easier. So I would certainly echo that if I could change one thing, it would be the way that we choose to trust one another and the way that we choose to collaborate with each other. I think that could be a really significant shift in accelerating the clean transition, but more importantly, creating a nice future for us all to live in and enjoy.
Now, on that note, I want to thank everyone for an insightful discussion on the practical pathways for China-EU cooperation on green growth. There's clearly a lot of potential ahead to create a more sustainable future for our planet, more synergy between China and Europe. My thanks to our media partner Euronews, to Jeremy, and to our guests.
Thank you, Guan. I think we've highlighted many shared interests, you're totally right, and shared challenges ahead. Thanks also to CGTN and to our guests. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, and see you soon.